what ended up happening really was I just burned my whole life to the ground and had to start over. And I wanted to start over. I wanted to start over almost from scratch to figure out what was important to me because I didn't know anymore. I've been living this life and playing these various roles and even living in a city where I wasn't sure how I got there anymore. And so I realized that I had been putting my own life on hold while I was raising her. It was almost like I had to be an adolescent again and go out into the world and figure out who I was all over again.
Welcome to The Whole Writer, a place where we talk about what it means to show up as a writer. Not just a better writer or a more productive writer or a published writer, but a whole one. Someone who's grounded in their voice, in their community, in their creative path, even when the world tells them to hustle, compare, or conform. I'm Nicole Meyer, a multi-published author and book coach who believes that nurturing the person behind the page is just as important as refining the words on it. Each week, we'll explore the terrain of writing life with honesty, warmth, and practical wisdom, creating space for you to write from a place of wholeness rather than depletion. Whether you're drafting your first manuscript or publishing your fifth book, you'll find conversation and companionship for the journey here. So, settle in, bring your questions and your curiosity, and let's discover what it means to write and live with authenticity and purpose. Welcome on in, listeners. I'm so pleased to have my guest, Anne Boyd, here today. And if you are a female creator, specifically a writer, this episode is definitely for you. Before we welcome Anne in, I wanted to share a little bit about her. So, Anne Boyd is the author of the viral Substack newsletter, Audacious Women Creative Lives. She's just completed a master's in creative writing for fiction at the University of Manchester. She is now working toward her lifelong dream of publishing a novel while coaching writers and hosting retreats. She's also the author or editor of 7 books from her 23-year career as a literature professor. She wrote 2 critically acclaimed books published by W.W. Norton. Constance Fenimore Wilson, Portrait of a Lady Novelist, was reviewed on the cover of the New York Times Book Review and named one of the best 10 books of the year by the Chicago Tribune. Her next book, Meg, Jo, Beth, Amy, The Story of Little Women and Why It Still Matters, was an indie bestseller and received rave reviews. It was chosen as one of the best books of the year by library journal The Daily Mail and A Mighty Girl. Anne received 4 National Endowment for the Humanities Awards, 2 for Public Scholarship. She has also appeared on NPR, BBC Radio, and CBS Sunday Morning, and has bylines in The Washington Post, Literary Hub, and elsewhere. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Nicole.
That was so fun to read your bio because you have such a rich career. And I first was attracted to you on Substack because you have this beautiful newsletter, I think with a community of over 10,000 people. And it is all about supporting creative women. But it's fun to read your bio to see just the rich layers and all the things that you've done.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I feel like I'm in my second life. I had a former life and now I'm doing a second one.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think as a writer, people are probably nodding along as they're listening, because when we do come to our writer selves or our creative selves, we do feel like it's opening up a whole new chapter, pardon the pun, but it's really true.
Yes, I've used that metaphor myself many times. Starting the chapter. Yes.
Okay, well, speaking of changes and new chapters, I do have my first question for you. So I know that you made a dramatic life change at 52. You left academia to become a full-time writer and travel. So my question for you is there a moment or realization that made you decide it was time to take that leap? And I also want to know, did you overcome certain fears about doing that?
Yes, well, huge fears. And it wasn't one moment, but a series of moments, a cascade of things that happened. I guess straws that were getting piled up and one finally broke the camel's back, as they say. I had been unsettled in my career and I was disenchanted with academia, with academic writing in particular, but also my institution was not supporting me. And it became very difficult for me to envision a future in that career path. And so I have been for years dreaming of being a full-time writer. And I was writing nonfiction. I wrote a biography. I wrote a book about Little Women, which is sort of a biography of a book. And I was very involved in the Biographers International Organization. It's on their board. And I kind of saw that as my ticket out. And I tried that route. It's very difficult to support yourself full time as a writer. And I knew that was going to be difficult. And I took a book coaching class and I was learning that I really had a lot of skills that were marketable that you just, when you're stuck in academia, you feel stuck. You just feel stuck. But if you're in the humanities, you feel like your skills aren't really marketable outside. It's like you're a business professor or something. So it was very difficult for me to envision making the transition. And it was over a series of years. I took that book coaching course and I published my own books and went on book tours and was at festivals, meeting other writers and learning about the kind of advances that they would make and sort of trying to figure this out. And then the pandemic came along. And meanwhile, I was already getting very ill. I had an autoimmune disorder called Meniere's disease. Fluid collects in your inner ear and you get tinnitus and you can't hear very well. And then you also get vertigo. And it's the vertigo that's particularly debilitating.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah. And all they would say is that it's caused by stress. And I've learned that that's not an answer at all as to why this is happening to you. Stress itself is another symptom. And Western medicine does not know how to treat autoimmune disorders. They only wanted to give me steroids or even do some surgical procedure in my ear. The steroids didn't work or they made me more sick. I was not going to let them go into my ear with some knives.
Oh my gosh.
I was trying all things to get better, supplements and diets and all the things. And when I kind of zeroed in on the fact that there was too much stress in my life and it was coming from my work. And then during the pandemic, I wasn't going to campus anymore. The stress in my life reduced considerably, except for I discovered during the pandemic that under the pressure cooker of being at home 24/7, that a lot of the stress is coming from my marriage as well. Now I'm also anticipating the fact that my daughter's going to be leaving for college soon. So, there's a series of things happening that make you think that, well, it's not just that I don't want to be a professor anymore. It's that my whole life doesn't make sense. And I got very sick during the pandemic, very, very sick. And so I had to go through this whole process of trying to de-stress my life and doing all kinds of meditation and journaling and therapy. And it really helped a lot to the extent that I was able in September 2022 to start traveling full time. I just was moving around. We sold our house. I left my marriage when my daughter went off to college and I began traveling because I didn't know where I wanted to live yet. And the other thing that happened during the pandemic in 2021 is that my half brother died of brain cancer.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. And I was there with him when he died. And that night, I decided I was going to Europe. All the other things were kind of already sort of in motion, but I didn't know what I was going to do yet. And then I just decided I'm going back to Europe. And I had spent time in Europe when I was younger and felt more myself during those times. And also in later trips, I would start taking my daughter when she was old enough. I would start taking her over with me for the summers and I would teach in some study abroad programs. And so there's a lot of things. So it's not a simple answer, but that's how it all kind of started. What ended up happening really was I just burned my whole life to the ground and had to start over. And I wanted to start over. I wanted to start over almost from scratch to figure out what was important to me because I didn't know anymore. I've been living this life and playing these various roles and even living in a city where I wasn't sure how I got there anymore. And things have just happened along the way, but I felt like I'd never actually chosen any of that except for having a daughter. And that was always the most important thing. And then when she was off to college, suddenly nothing else made sense. So yeah, I think that period of life was a huge transition for a lot of women and your children leave. And you've been funneling all of your life force into them, really. And so I realized that I had been putting my own life on hold while I was raising her. It was almost like I had to be an adolescent again and go out into the world and figure out who I was all over again. Yeah.
I just love that you're sharing that because I know so many people listening, myself included, are nodding along. We can relate to that on so many levels, whether you're a parent or not, whether you're entering midlife or not. There are those moments where you say, I've lost myself. But what I love that you mentioned is that you had the foresight or enough clarity to say, where do I feel most like myself? And that really resonates with me because when all else is lost, that is something that's helpful to say, where do I feel most like myself? And you had a little inkling.
I didn't have a pinpoint on the map, though. I had a subcontinent.
Yes.
So I was like, so I was going to spend time in France, I spent time in Germany, I spent time in Italy and Sicily, and in the UK, in Scotland, England in particular. And I really fell in love with Scotland, but ultimately found myself feeling most at home in the UK, Scotland and England. And that was a whole process, though. I left 3 years ago.
That was a huge life change.
It was huge. It was major. And it really was it was like a hiatus from my life. I just had to pause. But the time that I was traveling, I didn't know what I was going to do yet. I didn't know who I was. But I always knew that being a writer was part of it. That desire was still there. And specifically a creative writer. But I didn't know how to do that. It's kind of an interesting story, actually, how I decided to become a creative writer. Focus on that. I really wanted to always do it, but I was always afraid. I always felt like it was something that some people just had and the rest of us didn't, or I wasn't sure how to learn how to do it. And I read all the craft books and everything, but it's just so much advice and so overwhelming. So I was writing a memoir actually while I was traveling. And I also had decided I wanted to stay in the UK. And I had tried to apply for a visa as a writer. And it's a complicated story, basically because I wrote nonfiction, I wasn't eligible.
You're kidding.
I would be eligible.
Why is that?
It's because the Global Talent Visa is for people in many different fields, including writers. But writers are endorsed by the Arts Council, and the Arts Council does not consider nonfiction writers artists. Even memoirists are not considered artists. They actually told me, because I did submit an application because there was no one else to submit to, and I met all the criteria. I had all the evidence that they had asked for my publication of my book about little women. And they wrote back to me and said, you don't write literature, you write about literature.
Wow, we could do a whole podcast just on that topic alone.
Unpacking that. I mean, just imagine, this is the culmination of your life's work. And you hear this, and all of my hope for writing on this. And I felt like the universe was telling me in kind of a brutal way, but the universe was telling me, maybe now it's time you write that novel.
Beautiful realization.
Yeah. So I decided I would buy myself some time to stay in the UK as a student and do a master's of creative writing. And I did that at the University of Manchester because I wanted to study with Jeanette Winterson. She teaches there and she's an incredible writer. And then while I was there, they hired Sarah Hall, who's amazing, and also studied with Beth Underwood, and she's incredible. And it just was it was way more than I ever could have expected. And I learned so much. It flew by. The classes flew by. I've just turned in my dissertation today.
Oh, congratulations.
Yes, I know. It's so wonderful. I hit submit just today. The dissertation, it sounds really big, but it's only 15,000 words, but it's the beginning of my novel. So I've been writing in script, and I've been taking all the things that I've written that haven't worked, or I've decided to do something different, right? I put them down in the research area, so they're not in the draft anymore. And I went in there and I looked, and I selected them all so I could do a word count, see how many words I've written that aren't actually in my book yet.
And
over 100,000 words.
You're kidding.
I've already written more than a book. That's how much I've written to get to where I finally have a beginning that feels right. And I've changed it so much. It was third person, now it's first person. It was present tense, now it's past tense. It was one unified story, now it's two timelines. And it was about somebody different. And it's grown so much as I kept learning from my tutors there. It just kept getting deeper and richer. And so I'm happy with where it's ended up. I know it still has a long ways to go, and I have to finish the whole book. What I really learned from the process, though, is that there's no point A to point B when you're writing a novel. I mean, there's no way I could ever begin to chart my process or count up how many drafts I've written. All I know is I've written 112,000 words. They're sitting in the trash file, basically.
This is so fascinating to me because I'm also a novelist. I work with novelists. And I know that a lot of us have that ticking time clock in the back of our head of, well, gosh, it's going to take so much time to change it from first person to third, or to cut out the whole gearing up or whatever it is, just to really go back to the basics, go back to the beginning. But you allowed yourself that freedom.
Well, it's interesting because I think the conventional wisdom is that you should turn off your internal editor and just write through a rough draft. And I probably would have done that, or certainly written farther than I got. There were times when I started writing ahead and I would get well into like part 2. And then I'm just like, okay, what am I doing here? I'm lost now. Or I'd get to a point where it's just like, it doesn't feel right. I don't really know my main character well enough yet. Or I don't know what this story really is about. I mean, I have the plot, but it's like, so what? So it's a love story set during World War II. And it's a great love story. It's amazing. But it's like, well, why am I telling it? What's the point of all of this? Which is a question we ask a lot in nonfiction. I don't know that anyone was asking me that in terms of fiction, anyone in my program, but I was asking it myself. Because actually, when I started writing my dissertation, my advisor started asking me lots of questions. Are they doing this? And blah, 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 blah. And I realized, I don't know, because I don't know why I'm telling the story and what this story is really ultimately about and what the point of it is. So then I realized that there was more to the story about what happened after the war and what happened to the woman's children, because she left her marriage and fell in love with this refugee of the Nazis and helped him escape France. But then what happened to her children afterward? So now it's a different story, but it's a story that actually touches me very deeply. And I know now why I'm telling it. It's just the whole thing makes so much more sense now. But I feel like there's something important about going back to the beginning instead of just pushing forward when you're not really sure what your story is yet. I wanted to have that firm foundation to know what my story really was. And who knows what will happen now as I write forward. But part of it was just that I had to, because I had to turn in this dissertation and had to be perfect. I had to go back and keep trying to get it right.
Well, I love that, because I always tell writers when we talk about the point of the book or story message, I just say, boil it down to how do you want your readers to walk away from it? And when they reach the end, how do you want them to feel? What do you want them to take away? And a lot of times we can't answer that right off the bat because we don't know ourselves. And you've just demonstrated that beautifully, talking about the process. And it's also a reminder. This isn't sort of a hard charging, gaining, make a product sort of process. This is a let's understand the human condition. Let's understand what it is I want readers to take away. And you kind of lit up when you talked about this new approach and this new sort of, let's talk about after the war and let's talk about her children. You really did light up when you were saying that. So I can tell it's meaningful to you.
Yeah. The story is based on a real person and her real life. So I'm not making up the essentials of the story, but I wanted to really get inside of it and feel like I really understood why she made the choices that she did and how she was able to rationalize things as they were happening. And it was wartime. And there were lots of reasons why she needed to leave her marriage, but she lost 2 of her children by doing that, as many women did who left their marriages. But the children, as they grew up, suffered serious consequences. And seeing her wrestling with that just added so much more dimension to her character. It wasn't just this heroic love story. It becomes more complex. There are lots of shades of gray. And I don't know how I would answer the question of how I want readers to feel when they're done reading it, except for I want them to feel that, wow, life is complicated and there are no easy answers. Because it's the question of, when is a woman allowed to live for herself and choose love, but if she has children, at what point are women allowed to be themselves first and mother second. Or
you just said it perfectly. there's your tagline for your.
Figure out how to say it. Because it just even sounds like, oh my God, can I even say that? Mother second? What do you mean? I have to put motherhood first all the time.
I understand that.
Yeah, we expect so much of mothers, and mothers are still human beings.
Yeah. Okay. This is a beautiful segue because what you're saying resonates so much. I mean, I'm a mother of 3 young adult children. I understand so much of what you're saying, but you also have had the capacity to open up your knowledge, your wisdom, your encouragement to so many other women writers at the same time while you're writing this novel. So I do want to talk about your Substack and your thriving community and your message for what you call audacious women. So do you want to talk a little bit about what drew you to that sort of mission?
Sure. Well, my Substack was called Letters from Anne, which is a sort of typical type of Substack title, right? Or newsletter title. And I was writing about my travels and what I was doing. And then one day I had started trying to write more about the women writers that I was sort of collecting, these women writers and artists as I was traveling, because I didn't know what I wanted my life to be. But I was fascinated by these women writers and artists that I was learning about. And I just wanted to know, how do women do it? What choices do they make in their lives? How do they commit themselves to their art? Are they able to have love and children and relationships and their art? And what I found was that no, most of them, so many of them had to make a choice. The ones who were successful chose the career and raised kids. And sometimes just for the rest of their lives, they were celibate and didn't have children, or let the parents raise the children and basically abandon them. It's all these kind of interesting scenarios. And then I came across the writer Tove Jansson. She was a writer and artist, and she really inspired me because her motto was love and work. Maybe it was work and love, because I think she might have put the work first, but still that, and she wanted to bring them together. And those were the 2 important things in her life. And she had a partnership with another woman artist whose name I can't remember. It's a Finnish name, I think, and difficult. But they had, their living quarters were near each other, and they visited, and their studios, and they'd spend every evening together. They go do their work, and then they'd spend every evening together. And I thought, oh, this is such a beautiful scenario. I love that. And that was sort of a guiding light. But all of these women were so audacious in the choices that they made in their lives. And I was so inspired by them on many levels, just the work that they did too. So some of them are like Kay Boyle, who is the writer I'm writing a novel about now. And also Dora Maar. I lived in Dora Maar's house for a month on a residency.
Oh, you're kidding.
And that was amazing. She is an artist who was also one of Picasso's mistresses. And Suzanne Baladon, who was a French painter, she was a model initially for Renoir and others, and she became this amazing, amazing artist in her own right. And so these are the writers and artists I was learning about and writing about. And that's how I came up with the title, Audacious Women Creative Lives. And then because I wanted to write less about myself and more kind of offering something to readers. And then there was this day that I had posted some pictures of my trip in Sicily on my Facebook or Instagram or something. And somebody I knew commented, "I like your life." I thought, you have no idea what my life is like. You just see the pictures I'm posting on Instagram.
Right.
And so I wrote a whole post about what my life is really like. And I called it 2 years ago, I Quit My Life. And it was about how I was still struggling to find my footing. I still didn't know where I was going to live. I had missed out on that visa application. I was trying to decide if I wanted to do a master's in creative writing in the UK so I could stay. I didn't even have a place to live in at that time. I was so up in the air, and I was like, really? Would you really like to live this life? People seem to have this idea. So I wrote this post and it went viral. It was amazing. And it was going viral before anything happened on Substack, because I only had 1,000 subscribers then. And I'd had the same number of subscribers all year. I wasn't growing or anything. I was just flatlined. It was the number I came in with, that I came into Substack with. And then all of a sudden, this piece was getting passed around, and it started showing up, I guess, in the feeds and the notes or something on algorithms. And Elizabeth Gilbert saw it and she shared it.
For the listeners, that's the author of Eat, Pray, Love, and so many other beautiful books.
Yes. I've had an absolute hero of mine on so many levels. And I just cried when I saw she said, I love everything about this. And I just was like, that she had read my writing.
And commented.
Yeah. And then that she'd shared it with her readers. I mean, I just couldn't, I was absolutely floored. And I was trying to sell my memoir then, which I did not sell, by the way. It did not get picked up.
Memoir's hard right now. I mean, I don't know how long it's hard.
Memoir's hard. So that was another sign that the universe was telling me it's time to write that novel.
Yes.
Yes. And so with Elizabeth Gilbert's endorsement, and the virality just went exponential at that point. And so suddenly I had all these people who were interested in my life choices. And so I was
inspired by your life choices.
Inspired, but also really appreciating that I was being honest about how difficult it's been. So I've been very honest since then. And there have been some very difficult times because my Meniere's disease came back this year. The first part of this year, I was very, very sick with vertigo again. And so I've written about that. And I've also wrote about all the stuff that I've learned and the tremendous healing journey that I've been. It's been incredible. And that healing journey has allowed me to reach depths in my creative writing that I never could have before. And I've learned so much about the healing power of the mind and how plastic the brain is and how reprogrammable the subconscious is, because the subconscious is actually doing all the work all the time. We don't realize how much of what we're doing all the time is based on this programming. A lot of it's sort of laid in there from when we're very young. And when something gets triggered, it can really throw you off. And I think every time we sit down to write, there is the potential for being triggered. Writing is such incredibly deep work. It touches us on so many levels. And I know so many writers who get frustrated or feel blocked. They feel like they're being choked almost. There's something that wants out. They don't know how to say it. And that's energy. That's energetic blockage. And I know you've talked about that on your podcast before. I really appreciate that you're interested in the whole writer, because so much of the discussion on how to write or how to be a writer is about craft, really surface stuff, how to get an agent.
Yes.
But it's the deeper work that has to be done first to even get to the point where you're writing something that's even worth the time or attention of an agent. So I'm really interested now in having done a lot of that deep work myself, helping other writers do it. And that's something that, I'll be sharing more as my newsletter develops. I'm sorry, I've gone off on so many tangents.
No, I'm so thrilled that you have, because this is what we need right now. I was on Substack Notes this morning and shared with everybody that I had someone approach me early this morning asking if I would help lead something to have AI write books for people. And I just said, absolutely not, because everything you're saying, I know it's so prevalent. It's just out there everywhere right now. But everything you're saying about the deeper work and coming to a better understanding of ourselves and the subconscious and how it opens up these pathways for what we're creating. That's the opposite of having AI write a book for you and market it and say, ta-da, I have a deal. So what you're saying resonates with me specifically today of all days, but also I know with so many other people out there.
Yes, because I think I didn't know how to be a writer or how to write creatively for so many years because I was bringing so much baggage with me when I sat down. It wasn't just, my internal editor, my internal critic was talking to me. It went much deeper than that. I think there was such a fundamental blockage of so many things that I had to push down over the years, so many things that I couldn't look at, I couldn't acknowledge that had happened to me. And I had to go through the process of acknowledging them and accepting them and letting them go in order to let the energy flow again. And even to have the space inside of me to begin to imagine myself into someone else's experience, because I was so stuck and unable to look at the truth of my own life. And until you can really, really look at the truth and say the truth about your own life, how are you possibly going to do that for your characters?
Absolutely. Amen.
Amen. Hallelujah.
Amen to that.
That's what's required for the writer, right? You have to be able to tell the truth.
Amen. I mean, really, how can you share someone's deeper inner journey if you don't acknowledge your own?
Yes, exactly. If you haven't taken your own inner journey, and frankly, I thought I was pretty evolved. I got married when I didn't get married till I was 30, but I was in the relationship for like 6, 7 years before that, which started to go back to when I'm pretty young. And I was studying to do my PhD, and then I became a professor, and then I got married, and then I had a kid, and the whole thing. And I was doing all the external things. I was doing all the external things, and I was putting all of my energy into raising my child and helping her grow. And my growth and development just stopped. And so I had to go back almost to square one. And so getting that vertigo was a gift in a way, because it had been triggered and it made me acknowledge the trauma that I've been running away from all these years and discover the core wounds that I hadn't fully dealt with. I've been in years of therapy, and talk therapy is not going to help you rewire your brain. It can't, because it's just dealing with the conscious brain still. And it's stuff at the subconscious level where the blockages really are that you have to access. And so the work that I did was with a quantum energy coach. And I'm so excited about quantum energy coaching that was developed by Dr. Melanie Sandman. And I'm going to be taking her practitioner course so that I can share this with people and help writers in particular go on this deep journey themselves and release these blockages, create the space and allow them to really fulfill their creative dreams and be able to speak again in a way that they haven't been able to.
Oh, that just gives me the chills. I'm so thrilled that you're doing that. I'm thrilled that you shared it.
I'm excited. I mean, that's where I'm headed. And I love all of my readers, Audacious Women Creative Lives. And if you look through the comments, there are all these incredible women. I can't believe how amazing they are, interesting. And I know many of them are experiencing the things that I've experienced. It means so much to me to share something with them that I'm going through and to hear them say that I needed to hear this today, or this really resonated with me. This was helpful. Just saying the things that, I don't know, I'm sure there are people saying them out there, but they need to be said, and they need to be said over and over again, frankly.
Okay, so let's think of the listener right now who's saying, I am one of those women. I feel like this resonates with me. I do want to dive deeper into my creative self, but I do feel something's blocked or I can't quite put my finger on it. Is there some sort of, and I don't want to make this too prescriptive, but some sort of easy first step that you would recommend for them? Is it journaling? Is it joining a group like yours? What is something that they could look at and say, well, that feels accessible to me?
Gosh, that's such a good question. Oh, I wrote about this. There's this David White poem where he talks about taking the first step.
Yes, I think I saw it from you. Yeah.
And the first step, you think of it as a step outward. I have to start my journey. This really resonated with me because I thought I had to go out into the world to find myself, to figure out what I wanted in my life, to meet people, have new relationships. And I've done those things. But what my vertigo taught me was that the first step I had to take was within, closer to myself, not walking away from myself, but into myself. And it was really interesting because before my vertigo had started, like at the end of December, I was thinking about what my word for the year would be. And it was deeper. I don't know why. I just felt like I wanted to go deeper. And my vertigo, it stopped me in my tracks. I mean, I would be on the couch for hours, not able to move really. And so I had to go deeper and deeper to figure out what my body was trying to tell me. And maybe that's the first step is it's just even to examine what's going on in my body. What is my body trying to tell me? Because the mind and body are so intimately connected and related. The body is almost a physical manifestation of the inner life, the subconscious, the thing that we're buried, that we don't want to look at or express. Our body's expressing it for us. If we're exhausted, if we're suffering from digestion issues or headaches or hearing problems or pain in certain parts of your body. I mean, just what is my body trying to tell me? What can I learn from myself? What can I learn from my own self. And so journaling is kind of where it started for me. I remember the day, and I can't find it in my journals, but I remember the day when I started to write the truth in my journal. I started to say, I'm really unhappy. And I couldn't say that before. I couldn't even say it out loud. I couldn't even say it to myself.
Right. That's so relatable. So relatable. Well, I would love to let people know how they can find you on Substack, how they can become part of your community, your world, because I know that you are captivating the listeners right now. You're definitely been captivating to me. I just feel so grateful to you for opening up and being so authentic and truthful. These are the conversations that I want to have. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And these are exactly the conversations I want to have too. And so I know we're going to keep having them over at my Substack. It's Audacious Women, Creative Lives. And I'm going to be starting a series of conversations with other women who've gone through big transitions like me, who are doing bold, creative things in the world, because I've been so inspired by them as well. And I want to share them with readers. And I really want to start a reading group of audacious women writers. Now that my course is over, my master's is done, I'm going to keep working on my novel, but I'm also going to start working more with writers, with coaching, and growing this community and offering more to my subscribers. So I'd love to have your listeners over there. It's an amazing group, not just for the writing that I'm doing, but also for the way that people connect in the comments, community there. Yeah, it's a great place to be. And I just could not be happier to have them, because this whole journey and even the writing journey itself is such a lonely one.
It is.
And so to feel like all these people are just waiting to hear about what I've done next has been just amazing, incredible.
I love that. I love that so much. Thank you, Anne, for sharing all of your beautiful wisdom and insight with us today. Listeners, I will put more in the show notes, but I definitely encourage you to follow Anne, join her community, and we can't wait to hear about your novel that you're working on. I know that more good things are just around the corner. So thank you, Anne, and thank you, writers and readers, for listening. And we'll see you next time on The Whole Writer. If you want to check out my coaching programs for fiction writers, visit NicoleMeyer.com. That's MEIER. And if you like this episode, I'd love you to take a minute to leave a rating and review for this podcast. This will help more writers like you to discover the show and to get going on their writing journey. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, happy writing, everyone.